My mother has become a financial burden. We may have to sell her house. What is that? Let's look at the records. These are not my bills. And this is the page you hoped I'd never find.
My daughter called me a financial burden in front of her friends, her husband, and the investors she'd been trying to impress all evening. Amanda smiled when she said it, as if humiliating me politely made it less cruel. The room went quiet. Someone looked down at their wine glass. Someone else gave me that pitying smile people reserve for old women they think have no power left. But I didn't cry. I reached into my purse, pulled out the folder I had carried in with me, and placed it on the dinner table. Then I looked at my daughter and said, "If I'm the burden, Amanda, maybe we should show everyone whose bills are in these files." If you've ever been hurt by someone you sacrificed for, please subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. My name is Linda Brown, and before that dinner changed everything, I lived what most people would call a quiet life. I was 68 years old, widowed and living alone in a small brick house on the east side of Atlanta, Georgia. It was not the grandest house on the block, but it was mine. Every window, every floorboard, every rose bush beside the porch carried a memory. My husband Robert had painted the front door himself the summer before he got sick. He said the old white paint made the house look tired, so he chose a soft blue and spent 2 full afternoons sanding, priming, and brushing each coat like he was restoring a piece of history. Robert was that kind of man, careful, patient, proud in quiet ways. He was not rich, and neither was I, at least not in the way people in magazines talk about money. But we were steady. We paid our bills on time. We saved before we spent. We bought used cars and drove them until the seats cracked. We clipped coupons, packed lunches, and treated debt like a dangerous stranger knocking at the door. By the time Robert retired, our house was paid off. Our savings were modest but secure. And when he passed away 4 years before this story began, I thought the hardest thing I would have to survive was the silence he left behind. I was wrong. After Robert died, mornings became the loneliest part of my day. I would wake up and reach across the bed before remembering there was nobody there. I still made coffee for 2 for almost 3 months. I would pour his cup, set it across from mine at the kitchen table, and only realize what I had done when the steam disappeared untouched. People came around at first. Church ladies brought casseroles. Neighbors checked on me. Robert's old friends called and said, "Linda, you let us know if you need anything." But grief has a way of thinning a room. After the funeral, flowers wilted, and the sympathy cards stopped arriving. Life became very still. Too still. The ticking clock in the hallway sounded louder. The refrigerator hummed like company. Sometimes I would leave the television on all afternoon just to hear another human voice in the house. That was when my daughter, Amanda Brown, began coming by more often. Amanda was 39, beautiful, polished, and ambitious in a way I had never been. She always smelled like expensive perfume and carried herself like someone being photographed even when no camera was around. She had my cheekbones and Robert's sharp eyes, but somewhere along the way she had developed a hunger for admiration that I did not fully understand. Still, she was my daughter. And when you are a mother, you can see the baby you held even when the grown woman in front of you is wearing heels and talking about branding strategies. Amanda would stop by with groceries and say, "Mom, I was near the store anyway." She would bring soup and say, "You need to eat better." She would look around my kitchen sigh and say, "You can't keep doing everything alone." At first, those words felt like love. I had spent so many nights pretending I was fine that her concern softened me. I wanted to believe I was not becoming one of those old women people forgot about. I wanted to believe my daughter still needed me, still cared for. Me still saw me as more than a sad widow in a paid-off house. Amanda would sit at my table and talk about her dreams. She had started a lifestyle consulting business with her husband, Eric Walker. They called it Brown & Walker Lifestyle Consulting. The name sounded elegant, and Amanda said they helped women rebuild their personal image from the inside out. She worked with small business owners, charity wives, young executives, and anyone who wanted to look successful before they felt successful. I did not understand all of it, but I was proud of her. Eric was a real estate broker, charming in that smooth, practiced way some men have when they want you to like them quickly. He called me Miss Linda, even though I told him Linda was fine. He opened doors, complimented my cooking, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. "Your daughter is building something special," he told me one Sunday afternoon, while Amanda was in the bathroom touching up her lipstick. "She just needs a little runway." I remember that word, runway. It sounded temporary, safe, like a plane needing space before it took off. So when Amanda told me business was slow 1 month, I helped her. It started small. $800 for office rent, then $1,200 for marketing photos, because, according to Amanda, presentation is everything. Then, a little more for a networking luncheon she promised would bring in 3 new clients. "Just until things stabilize," she said, squeezing my hand across the kitchen table. I hate even asking Mom, and I believed her. I told myself that parents help their children. I told myself Robert would have wanted Amanda to succeed. I told myself money sitting in an account was less important than giving my daughter the confidence to stand on her own feet. I had worked for almost 35 years as a financial records manager for a hospital network. My job had not been glamorous, but it trained me to notice things. Numbers out of place, dates that did not line up, signatures that looked rushed, missing documents, charges hidden under vague descriptions. I could read a stack of invoices the way some people read novels. But when it came to Amanda, I did not read closely enough. That is the shame I still carry. Not because I was foolish, because I was lonely. Loneliness can make you generous in dangerous ways. It can make you mistake attention for affection. It can make you grateful when someone says, "Let me handle that," even when some small part of you whispers, "Why?" Amanda began helping me with little things around the house. She changed the password on my streaming account because she said it was too simple. She helped me order prescriptions online. She sat beside me while I logged into my bank account and said, "Mom, you really need to stop writing everything down in that old notebook. It's not secure." I laughed and said, "That old notebook has worked for me longer than the internet has been alive." She smiled, but it was tight. "Times have changed," she said. "You have to let family help." That phrase became her favorite key. Family should help. Family should trust each other. Family should not keep secrets. And slowly, without my noticing at first, she began moving through my life like she had permission to rearrange it. She looked through my mail when she came over. She asked about my insurance policies. She told me certain repairs were too expensive. She suggested I should stop giving small donations to my church because I was on a fixed income now. I reminded her that my income was fixed, not gone. She laughed lightly, kissed my cheek, and said, "I know, Mom. I'm just looking out for you." I wanted to believe that, too, because the alternative was unbearable. There were signs in the beginning, though, small ones, the kind you dismiss because accepting them would break your heart too early. Once I walked into the living room and saw Amanda holding my phone. She was standing near the window, scrolling quickly, her back turned to me. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped just a little. Then she smiled. "Your banking app needed an update. I was just fixing it." I looked at the phone in her hand. "I don't remember asking you to do that." "You didn't," she said, handing it back. "That's why I did it before it became a problem." Her voice was sweet. Her smile was calm. And because she was my daughter, I ignored the cold little feeling that moved through my chest. That evening, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table with Robert's empty chair across from me. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic beyond the trees. I picked up my old notebook, the one Amanda hated, and opened it to the page where I kept my passwords and bill reminders. For reasons I could not explain, then I wrote the date at the bottom of the page. Then I wrote one sentence beneath it. "Amanda had my phone today longer than usual." I stared at those words for a long time. They looked small, harmless, almost silly. So I closed the notebook and told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself grief had made me suspicious. I told myself no daughter would look at her lonely mother and see an opportunity. But deep down, somewhere beneath the love and the guilt and the need to believe my family was still my safe place, the woman who had spent 35 years reading financial records had finally opened her eyes. And once I started seeing the numbers, Amanda's story began to fall apart. The first time Amanda told me I should not drive at night anymore, I almost appreciated it. We were sitting in my kitchen after supper, and rain was tapping gently against the windows. She'd come over with a container of lemon chicken and a bottle of sparkling water, acting as if she had simply been thinking of me. Eric was with her that evening, leaning against the counter in his pressed shirt, checking messages on his phone while pretending not to listen. Mom Amanda said, reaching across the table to touch my hand, "I worry about you being out after dark." I smiled because I thought she meant it kindly. "I've been driving in Atlanta longer than you've been alive," I know she said. "But things change. Your reflexes change. Other drivers are crazy now." Eric looked up then. "She's right, Miss Linda. It's not about you. It's about everybody else on the road." That sounded reasonable enough. So I nodded and said I would avoid late errands unless necessary. A week later, Amanda asked for my spare car key, just in case she said, "What if you fall? What if something happens and I need to move your car?" I hesitated, but only for a second. She was my daughter. Robert and I had raised her to know where the emergency keys were, the insurance folders, the breaker box, the water shutoff valve. Family having access to family did not feel strange at first, so I gave her the spare key. I did not know then that control rarely walks through the front door wearing its real name. It arrives dressed as concern. It speaks softly. It says, "I'm only trying to help." After the car key came the house insurance. Eric stopped by one afternoon with Amanda and said he had been reviewing property values in my area. "Your coverage might be outdated," he said, sitting on my sofa like a man preparing for a business meeting. A lot of older homeowners don't realize they're underinsured. I told him Robert and I had always kept our paperwork current. "Of course," he'd said quickly. Robert was a careful man, but policies change, markets change. "I'd be happy to take a look." Amanda added, "Mom, Eric does this all the time. Let him help you." Again, it sounded reasonable. So I pulled the folder from the hallway cabinet and let him review the policy. He asked about the deed, the property tax statement, the appraisal from years earlier. I remember watching his eyes move over those pages. Too focused, too interested. At the time, I told myself he was simply being thorough. Then came the online banking. Amanda had always teased me about preferring paper statements. I liked paper. I liked holding proof in my hands. At the hospital, paper had saved us more than once when systems crashed. Files disappeared or someone claimed a charge had never been approved. But Amanda made my habits sound old-fashioned, even dangerous. "Mom, older people get scammed because they don't monitor things online," she said one Saturday morning. "You need real-time alerts." "I check my accounts," I told her. With a notebook, she said, almost laughing, "That's not the same." I felt embarrassed, and I hated that I felt embarrassed in my own kitchen. So I let her sit beside me at the table while I logged in. She showed me how to set up alerts, how to check pending charges, how to reset passwords. She spoke quickly, tapping the screen, explaining features as if I were a child learning the alphabet. I tried to follow everything, but every time I reached for the phone, she took it back. "Let me do it. It's faster." That became another phrase I heard often. "Let me do it. It's faster. You don't need to stress." Soon, small things started shifting around me. My bank statements arrived later than usual. Sometimes envelopes in my mail basket had already been opened. When I asked Amanda about it, she said I was just sorting out the junk mail. You get so much of it. A medical bill I had placed on the counter disappeared. 2 days later, Amanda told me she had handled it. Handled how I asked. "I called them," she said. "It was probably a billing error." Probably. That word stayed with me. At church, when Mrs. Patterson asked how I was managing since Robert's passing, Amanda answered before I could. "She's doing okay," she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But numbers overwhelm her now, so I've been helping with most of the financial stuff." I turned and stared at her. Numbers overwhelm me now. For 35 years, numbers had been my language. I had caught duplicate charges hidden in hospital vendor invoices. I had found missing signatures that saved departments from audits. I had trained younger employees who thought software could replace common sense. Yet there stood my daughter telling another woman I could no longer handle numbers. Mrs. Patterson gave me a sympathetic smile. "Well, it's good you have Amanda." I wanted to say I handled million-dollar reports while my daughter was still learning multiplication tables, but I did not. I smiled politely because mothers are trained to protect their children's image, even when their children are damaging theirs. Amanda's comments grew more frequent after that. At the pharmacy, she told the cashier, "Mom gets confused by all these insurance codes." At a family friend's barbecue, she laughed and said, "She still thinks online banking is some kind of magic." When I mentioned replacing a loose porch step, Amanda frowned. "Is that really necessary right now?" "It's loose," I said. "Someone could trip." "Mom, you're on a fixed income. You have to stop spending on every little thing." I looked at her manicure, at the gold bracelet on her wrist, at the designer handbag sitting beside her chair. That same week, she had posted photos from a rooftop brunch with white flowers, champagne glasses, and a caption that read, "Building wealth with elegance requires surrounding yourself with excellence." I had helped pay for that brunch. At least I thought I had helped. Amanda had said it was a client event and promised it would lead to contracts, but my porch step was reckless. A $75 donation to the church food pantry was not smart. A birthday gift for my neighbor's grandson was unnecessary. A new winter coat was something we should discuss first. We. That word began appearing in places where it did not belong. We need to think about your budget. We should review your policies. We may have to make changes. I started feeling as if I had become a tenant in my own life. Amanda still kissed my cheek. She still brought groceries sometimes. She still called me mommy when she wanted me soft, but beneath the affection was a new tone, one I could not ignore anymore. She was not asking, she was managing, and Eric was always nearby when papers were involved. He never pushed too hard in the beginning. That was the clever part. He would simply ask questions. "Do you know how much your house is worth? Now, have you thought about long-term care? Is Amanda listed anywhere in case of emergency? What happens if you become unable to sign documents?" Each question landed lightly, but together they formed a net. One afternoon after they left, I found my home insurance folder on the dining room table, instead of in the hallway cabinet where I always kept it. A sticky note was attached to the front. "Ask Eric about simplifying." I stood there with that folder in my hands, and for the first time I felt afraid. Not the kind of fear that makes you scream, the quiet kind, the kind that makes you listen harder. That night, I went to the closet in my bedroom and pulled down an old file box Robert used to call Linda's paper fortress. He had teased me for keeping copies of everything, but he also loved that about me. If the world ends, he used to say, my wife will still have the receipt. I sat on the floor and began sorting. Bank statements, insurance papers, credit card bills, property tax records, medical invoices. I made copies at the library the next morning. I bought a pack of colored folders from Office Depot. I labeled one Banking One House, one Medical, and one Amanda. Writing my daughter's name on a folder broke something in me, but I did it anyway. From then on, whenever Amanda said something strange, I wrote it down. Whenever mail arrived opened, I kept the envelope. Whenever Eric asked about my house, I made a note of the date and time. I did not confront them. Not yet. I still hoped there was an innocent explanation. I still hoped love had made me suspicious instead of truth making me alert. But I had spent my whole working life knowing one thing: numbers do not care about excuses. And once you start keeping records, patterns stop hiding. By the time Amanda invited me to the charity luncheon, I had already filled nearly half of the folder labeled with her name. I hated looking at it. Every receipt I copied, every note I wrote, every unopened question I tucked between those pages felt like another crack in the relationship I thought we had. More than once, I almost threw the entire folder into the fireplace. Then I would remember one of Amanda's comments. Mom gets confused. Mom doesn't really understand money anymore. And instead of burning the papers, I added another one. When Amanda called me that Tuesday afternoon, her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Mom, I have wonderful news." "What happened?" "Our charity committee is hosting a luncheon this Friday at the Magnolia Room downtown. I'd love for you to come." My heart lifted. "You want me there?" "Of course I do," she laughed. "People have been asking about you. Besides, you've been staying home too much." For a moment, I felt guilty for doubting her. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Maybe stress from running her business had simply made her impatient. Maybe this luncheon was her way of making things right. I spent far too much time deciding what to wear. I finally chose the navy blue dress Robert had bought me for our 40th wedding anniversary. It wasn't fashionable anymore, but it fit comfortably. And every time I wore it, I remembered the way Robert had smiled when I stepped out of the dressing room. "You look beautiful," he had whispered. Not because of the dress, because he always believed I was. I polished my low-heeled shoes, curled my silver hair, and fastened the pearl necklace Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. Before leaving, I stood in front of the hallway mirror. "You'll be fine," I told my reflection. "I hope so," I answered myself. The Magnolia Room overlooked downtown Atlanta through enormous glass windows. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and every table was decorated with white roses and gold candles. Women in elegant dresses laughed over champagne. Men in tailored suits exchanged business cards. I suddenly felt older than I had that morning. Amanda spotted me almost immediately. "There she is," she called, walking toward me with a bright smile. She kissed my cheek quickly. "You look nice." "Nice. Not beautiful, not elegant, just nice." "It's good to see you, sweetheart," I said. She glanced around before answering, making sure someone important was watching. "Come on, I want everyone to meet you." For a second, I felt proud. She led me from group to group, introducing me to local business owners, charity organizers, and several women from her networking circle. Then it happened. "This is my mom, Linda," Amanda said with a laugh. "She still thinks writing checks is the height of modern technology." A few people chuckled politely. I forced myself to smile. "Oh," I said lightly, "I just like keeping paper records." Amanda rolled her eyes playfully. "See what I mean?" The conversation moved on, but something inside me shifted. A few minutes later, Eric joined us carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. He slipped an arm around Amanda's waist. "We're basically managing 2 households these days," he joked. Someone laughed. Another guest looked at me sympathetically. "Oh, that must be difficult," a woman said to Amanda. Amanda sighed dramatically. "It isn't easy." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at them, at the audience, at the people whose admiration she wanted. "We just try to do what's best for family," she continued. "Sometimes caring for aging parents becomes a financial and emotional responsibility you never expected." My stomach tightened. Financial responsibility. I paid my own utilities. I bought my own groceries. My mortgage had been gone for years. I had never once asked Amanda to pay a single monthly bill. Yet everyone standing there now believed she was supporting me. One man even nodded respectfully. "You're a good daughter," Amanda smiled modestly. "We do what we have to." Eric squeezed her shoulder proudly. I looked at my daughter. She wasn't simply telling a harmless story. She was building a reputation. She wanted these people to see her as generous, selfless, successful, and apparently I was the helpless old mother who made her look heroic. For the first time, I realized that every joke about my age had a purpose. Every comment about my memory, every story about helping me. She was laying bricks, creating an image that depended on making me appear weak. The luncheon continued. People applauded speeches. A charity auction began. Waiters carried trays of elegant desserts through the room. I barely tasted the lemon tart on my plate. I couldn't stop replaying Amanda's words. Managing 2 households. Financial responsibility. None of it was true, but lies repeated often enough become someone else's reality. When I excused myself to the restroom, I stayed there longer than necessary. I wasn't crying, not yet. I simply stood at the sink staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed smaller than the one who had left home that morning. Maybe because someone she loved had spent an entire afternoon shrinking her. I was drying my hands when another woman entered. She hesitated after recognizing me. "Mrs. Brown?" I turned. It was Melissa Grant, one of Amanda's closest friends. We had met briefly once before. She looked uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She glanced toward the restroom door before lowering her voice. I don't know if I should be saying this." Immediately, every instinct I had developed over decades of reviewing records came alive. People hesitate before telling uncomfortable truths. "It's all right," I said gently. Melissa took a deep breath. "I'm really sorry if this sounds rude." "It won't." She looked genuinely distressed. "Amanda has talked about you before." I assumed she had. "No," Melissa shook her head. "I mean, a lot." I felt my heart beat slow instead of speed up. Slow hearts listen better. "Go on," Melissa swallowed. "She tells everyone that she's basically paying your bills." I said nothing. "She says your retirement money is almost gone." Still nothing. "She says she and Eric have had to sacrifice vacations because they keep helping you." My fingers tightened around my purse. "Does she?" Melissa nodded sadly. "She tells people you're overwhelmed by finances now." I closed my eyes for a moment. Not because I was surprised, because hearing the lie spoken aloud somehow hurt more than suspecting it. Melissa continued quietly. "Honestly, that's why some of us admire Amanda so much." I looked at her. "You admire her." "We thought she was taking care of her elderly mother while building a business." There it was, the story. Complete. Carefully polished. Amanda wasn't casually complaining. She had created an entire identity around rescuing me. Every compliment she received, every business connection, every sympathetic conversation, all of it rested on the belief that I had become her burden. Melissa's eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For believing it." I managed a small smile. "You couldn't know. But it isn't true, is it?" "No." She looked horrified. "I've never seen you ask Amanda for anything." "You haven't." "Then why would she?" She couldn't finish the sentence. Neither could I, because I still didn't know. Not completely. Money control attention. Or something even darker. Melissa reached into her handbag and handed me a folded napkin. "I don't think you're the one anyone should feel sorry for." I accepted it, even though my eyes were still dry. "Thank you." As we walked back toward the ballroom together, Amanda spotted us. For the briefest second, I saw something flash across her face. Not concern, calculation. She wanted to know what Melissa had said. Melissa simply smiled politely and walked away. Amanda approached me almost immediately. "Everything okay?" "Fine." "You were gone a while." I ran into Melissa. Amanda's smile froze for half a heartbeat. "Oh, we had a nice conversation." "What about?" I looked directly into my daughter's eyes. "The things people say." Amanda held my gaze. Then she laughed. "You know how gossip is." "Yes," I answered quietly. "I suppose I do." She seemed relieved that I didn't say more. The luncheon ended shortly afterward. Amanda hugged donors. Eric shook hands with businessmen. Photographers took smiling pictures. I slipped out quietly before anyone noticed. When I reached my car, I sat behind the steering wheel without starting the engine. The parking garage echoed with distant footsteps and the hum of elevators. I rested both hands on the wheel. For several minutes, I simply breathed. Then I opened my purse, removed the folder labeled Amanda, took out my notebook, and wrote one more sentence. "Melissa confirmed Amanda has been telling everyone I am living off her money." I underlined it once, then again. When I finally started the car, I wasn't the same woman who had driven to that luncheon. I had gone there hoping my daughter wanted to honor me. I left knowing she had been quietly rewriting my life for an audience that had never bothered to ask me whether any of it was true. And for the first time since Robert died, I stopped asking myself whether I was imagining things. I wasn't. The pattern was real, and somewhere inside those growing files, I knew the truth was waiting for me. I barely slept after the charity luncheon. Melissa's apology kept replaying in my mind. "We thought she was paying your bills. People admire her." She says your retirement money is almost gone. Those weren't careless comments made during a bad day. They were part of a carefully rehearsed story. Amanda had repeated them often enough that people accepted them as facts. For 3 mornings in a row, I woke before sunrise, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I had shared thousands of breakfasts. The folder labeled Amanda rested beside my coffee mug. Every time I looked at it, I hoped I would discover I had misunderstood something. I prayed there would be an innocent explanation, a bookkeeping mistake, a banking error, anything. Instead, I found something much worse. I drove to my bank on a quiet Wednesday morning carrying 2 canvas bags filled with old statements, notebooks, and folders. The young teller smiled politely when she recognized me. "Good morning, Mrs. Brown." "Good morning. I need copies of my statements going back 3 years." She looked surprised. "That's quite a lot." "I know. Would you like us to print everything?" "Everything." An hour later, I left with a thick stack of paper nearly 2 inches high. Back home, I spread the statements across my dining room table, the same table where Robert and I had celebrated birthdays, the same table where Amanda used to do her homework as a little girl while I cooked dinner. Now it had become an investigation desk. Old habits returned almost immediately. I didn't begin by looking for large withdrawals. That's what most people would do. Instead, I searched for patterns. Repeated names, monthly charges, small payments that quietly accumulated. After 35 years managing financial records, I knew the biggest thefts often hid inside ordinary numbers. The first hour revealed nothing unusual. The second hour made me uncomfortable. By the third hour, my stomach had begun to tighten. One payment appeared every month, Bloom Digital Solutions, $649, then another, Elite Event Catering, $985, then another, Skyline Suites Atlanta, $1,300. I frowned. None of those names meant anything to me. I reached for my credit card statements. The same names appeared again. Sometimes once, sometimes twice in the same month. I wrote every charge into a spreadsheet by hand. Date, amount, company, possible connection. By lunchtime, my dining room looked like the office I had retired from 4 years earlier. Paper covered every available surface. Yellow sticky notes marked suspicious transactions. A calculator sat beside my notebook. Robert used to laugh whenever I organized documents this way. "You make numbers confess," he liked to say. That afternoon, they finally did. Bloom Digital Solutions wasn't a medical provider. It wasn't a utility company. It wasn't connected to my insurance. A quick internet search showed it specialized in online marketing for small businesses. Elite Event Catering handled corporate networking events. Skyline Suites hosted executive conferences. I leaned back in my chair. Amanda. Every one of those businesses matched the kind of expenses Amanda had described while talking about Brown and Walker Lifestyle Consulting. Marketing, networking, client meetings, professional image. My heartbeat quickened. No, there had to be another explanation. Maybe Amanda had accidentally used my card once or twice. Maybe she intended to reimburse me. Maybe then I found the clothing charges. Luxury boutiques, designer shoe stores, high-end cosmetics, the same brands Amanda proudly displayed in photographs online. Not 1, not 5, dozens. I opened my laptop and searched Amanda's social media page. There she was, standing in front of a flower wall wearing the same cream-colored blazer purchased 2 days after one of the charges appeared on my statement. Another picture showed Amanda speaking at a networking breakfast. Behind her stood a banner from Brown and Walker Lifestyle Consulting. The catering invoice on my table carried the exact same date. My hands became cold, very cold, still. I refused to jump to conclusions. I picked up the phone and called the customer service number printed on the back of my credit card. After verifying my identity, I explained calmly that I needed help reviewing several transactions. The representative, a patient woman named Denise, listened carefully. "I'll be happy to look into those for you, Mrs. Brown." She placed me on hold. When she returned, her voice had changed slightly. "I do see that many of these purchases were made by an authorized user." I blinked. "I'm sorry. An authorized user on your account? I don't have one." According to our records, you do. Silence filled my kitchen. Who? Amanda Brown. For a moment, I honestly thought Denise must have confused my account with someone else's. There has to be a mistake. I'm looking directly at your profile. When was she added? Denise gave me the date. 8 months earlier. I closed my eyes. 8 months. For 8 months, Amanda had possessed legal authority to use my credit card, without me remembering any conversation about it, without my understanding what had happened. I don't remember authorizing that. I understand your concern. Can you tell me how it was done? It appears authorization was completed electronically. Electronically, not in person, not with paperwork I remembered signing. Electronic authorization. I would like a copy of every document connected to that request. Certainly. It may take several business days. I'll wait. After hanging up, I sat perfectly still. I wasn't angry yet. I was trying to remember. Had Amanda asked me to sign something on my phone? Had she said it was part of a software update? Had she handed me the device and said, just tap here? Memory is a strange thing. Sometimes grief leaves holes you don't realize exist until someone fills them with doubt. By late afternoon, I heard my phone buzz. It was Amanda. Hi, Mom. Her voice sounded bright. Too bright. Hi. What are you doing today? Looking through old paperwork. Oh. I decided it's time to organize everything. A pause. That's nice. I found some interesting charges. Another pause. Longer this time. What kind of charges? I'll tell you after I understand them. She laughed. You've always loved paperwork. I suppose I have. Don't stress yourself out. I'm not. Good. She sounded relieved. Then she quickly changed the subject. Eric and I might stop by this weekend. I'll let you know if that works. Another silence. That answer surprised her. Normally, I always said yes. When we ended the call, I immediately wrote down every detail. Time, duration, her questions, her hesitation, not because they proved anything, because patterns matter. Late Friday afternoon, an overnight envelope arrived from the credit card company. Inside were copies of the electronic authorization records. I spread them carefully across my dining room table. There it was, my name. Or at least something that looked like my name. The signature wasn't forged in the dramatic way movies portray. It resembled mine. Close enough to fool someone unfamiliar with my handwriting, but not close enough to fool me. For 40 years, I had signed payroll approvals, insurance forms, mortgage documents, retirement paperwork, tax returns, and thousands of hospital records. My signature always curved upward at the end. This one ended flat. My middle initial leaned the wrong direction. The spacing between my first and last name wasn't natural. Someone had copied my signature. Not perfectly, just well enough. I felt a wave of nausea. Then something inside me became perfectly calm. I walked into my home office, opened a brand new red folder, and wrote a label across the front, Unauthorized Financial Activity. Inside, I placed the electronic authorization, the suspicious transactions, Amanda's social media screenshots, my handwritten notes, the timeline. Then I totaled every questionable expense I had identified so far. The calculator displayed a number that made me stare for several seconds. $47, 382.16. That wasn't everything, only what I had confirmed. I looked around the quiet house. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows Robert had cleaned every spring. His photograph stood on the bookshelf beside my desk. I picked it up. I kept thinking I was being unfair to her, I whispered. The smiling face in the picture, frozen forever at 65, offered no answers. Only memories. Tears finally came. Not because of the money. Money can be earned again. Trust cannot. I cried because somewhere along the way, my daughter had stopped seeing me as her mother. She had started seeing me as an account. When the tears stopped, I wiped my face, closed the folder, and reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted to tell me the truth without emotion, a woman who had spent her entire career protecting people from financial misconduct, my old friend, Carolyn Hayes. She answered on the second ring. Linda, it's been too long. It has. What can I do for you? I looked down at the red folder resting on my desk. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Carolyn, I swallowed hard. I need you to tell me whether grief has made me paranoid. I paused. Or whether my own daughter has been stealing from me. Carolyn Hayes was one of the few people I trusted without hesitation. We had worked together years ago when the hospital hired her to review compliance procedures after a major audit. While everyone else focused on regulations, Carolyn focused on people. She believed that fraud almost never started with complicated paperwork. It started with someone convincing another person to stop asking questions. When she answered my call that Friday afternoon, I heard the same steady confidence in her voice that I remembered from 20 years earlier. Linda, it's been too long. It has. What can I do for you? I looked at the folders spread across my dining room table before answering. I think my daughter has been using my money. There was a brief silence. Then Carolyn asked the question I expected. What makes you think that? I spent nearly 40 minutes explaining everything. The recurring charges, Amanda's stories about supporting me, the authorized user on my credit card, the electronic signature that didn't look quite right, Melissa's confession at the charity luncheon. Carolyn never interrupted. When I finished, she asked only one question. Have you confronted Amanda? No. Good. I wasn't expecting that answer. You don't think I should? Not yet. Why? Because if you're right, she'll start destroying evidence the moment she realizes you've figured it out. I leaned back in my chair. I hadn't thought of that. I know you hadn't, Carolyn replied gently. That's why you called me. She asked me to scan every document I had collected and email everything to her. I'll review it tonight. You don't have to rush. I do if someone is trying to manipulate your finances. By the next morning, Carolyn called back. Linda? Her tone was different, more serious. I've reviewed everything. And you've done excellent work organizing the documents. That wasn't the answer I wanted. Carolyn, I also believe you're looking at a pattern, not a misunderstanding. My chest tightened. So I'm not imagining this. No, she paused, but we need more. More? If this ever becomes a legal matter, assumptions aren't enough. We need documents, timelines, witnesses, and intent. Intent. That word stayed with me. Carolyn explained that isolated financial mistakes could be dismissed. A repeated pattern supported by evidence was much harder to explain away. So, what do I do? You keep collecting records. I feel like I'm spying on my own daughter. I know. I hate this. I know that too. She sighed softly before continuing. But Linda, protecting yourself isn't the same as attacking Amanda. That sentence changed something inside me. Until then, every receipt I copied had felt like a betrayal. Now it felt like protection. Carolyn gave me a checklist. Keep every bank statement, print every suspicious email. Write down dates, times, and conversations immediately after they happened. Never hand Amanda original documents again. Change nothing that might alert her. And above all, don't sign anything. That advice became important sooner than either of us expected. 3 days later, Eric called. Miss Linda, are you home this afternoon? I am. I'd love to stop by for 15 minutes. What about, I've been reviewing the neighborhood market. My stomach tightened. All right. Eric arrived alone. He carried a leather portfolio tucked neatly beneath one arm and smiled as though he were visiting an old friend. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. I invited him inside. He declined coffee, choosing instead to spread several neatly organized documents across my dining room table. I've been watching home values around here. I know. They've gone up dramatically. I've noticed, he smiled. You could make a wonderful profit. I said nothing. He slid a brochure toward me. It showed a beautiful senior living community with landscaped gardens, walking paths, and modern apartments. This place is fantastic. It looks expensive. It is. Then he smiled again. But if you sell this house, it becomes very affordable. There it was. The first direct suggestion. I'm happy here. I understand. He nodded sympathetically. But houses this size become difficult. I manage. Today. His voice remained calm. But what about 5 years from now? He tapped the brochure gently. Less maintenance. More security. Closer to Amanda. He knew exactly which words to use. Family, safety, convenience. When I didn't respond, he opened his portfolio. I actually brought something. He handed me several pages clipped neatly together. A preliminary listing agreement. I looked at the title. Exclusive right to sell. I didn't ask for this. I know. I just wanted you to have information. Information? That sounded harmless. I began reading. The first page seemed ordinary enough. Property address, broker information, basic terms. The second page listed commissions, higher than I expected. The third page referred to additional fees. The fourth mentioned marketing costs. Then I noticed something strange. The page numbers skipped. 1, 2, 4. There was no page 3. I looked up. Is something missing? Eric glanced at the papers. Oh, he laughed lightly. Probably just a printing mistake. I'd like the missing page. It isn't important. My eyes met his. If it isn't important, why isn't it here? For the first time since he arrived, Eric looked uncomfortable. I can email it later. I'd rather read everything together. He hesitated before rearranging the papers. Then he pointed toward the signature line. This part doesn't commit you to selling. It doesn't. No. It's mostly so I can begin preparing. Preparing what I continued reading. One paragraph caught my attention immediately. If the property is sold to any buyer introduced by the brokerage during the agreement period, the wording was broad. Very broad. What does this mean? I asked. Eric leaned closer. Standard language. It says you'd receive a commission even under certain circumstances if I sold later. It's routine. I've never signed a real estate contract like this. Most people haven't. He smiled reassuringly. That's why you have professionals. Then he said something that made every instinct inside me come alive. You don't need to read every line. For a moment, I simply stared at him, because no honest professional had ever told me not to read a financial document, not once. At the hospital, the rule had always been the opposite. Read everything, ask questions, sign nothing you don't understand. I closed the folder carefully. I appreciate you bringing this. So, I'll think about it. His smile faded slightly. It would really help Amanda if we could move forward soon. There it was again. Amanda. Not me, not my future, not my wishes. Amanda. I'll let you know. He stood. I'll leave these with you. I'd like the missing page. I'll send it. After he drove away, I locked the front door and immediately scanned every document into my computer. Then I emailed them to Carolyn. Her response came less than an hour later. Do not sign anything, call me. When I did, she sounded unusually direct. Linda, this agreement heavily favors the broker. I thought so. There's also language I'd want explained before anyone signed it. And the missing page? I want to see it before you even consider another conversation. I looked out the window toward the maple tree Robert had planted when Amanda started kindergarten. Carolyn? Yes. I don't think they just want my money anymore. No. What do you think they want? She was quiet for several seconds. Then she answered softly, I think they want your house. That evening, I walked slowly through every room. The living room where Robert had proposed after painting the walls himself, the kitchen where Amanda had learned to bake chocolate chip cookies standing on a wooden stool, the hallway where our family Christmas photos still hung in perfect order. This wasn't just property. It was 43 years of my life. And for the first time, I wondered whether Amanda and Eric saw memories or only market value. Carolyn's words stayed with me long after we ended the call. I think they want your house. I walked from room to room that evening, touching familiar things as if I were introducing myself to them again. The worn oak banister Robert had refinished twice. The small crack in the kitchen tile that appeared the year Amanda graduated from high school. The framed family photo above the fireplace where the three of us stood on a beach in South Carolina, sunburned and laughing after the waves had knocked Robert's hat into the ocean. To anyone else, this house might have looked like aging real estate in a desirable neighborhood. To me, it was 43 years of my life. I refused to let panic make my decisions. The next morning, Carolyn came to my house carrying a laptop, a portable scanner, and a legal pad. The moment she stepped inside, she hugged me instead of asking about the paperwork. You look exhausted. I haven't slept much. I expected that. She placed her bag on the dining room table, looked at the stacks of folders I had organized, and smiled faintly. Some habits never leave you. I suppose not. No, she said, and today those habits may save you. For nearly 3 hours, we worked side by side. Carolyn reviewed every bank statement while I arranged documents by date. Whenever we found a suspicious transaction, she placed a small yellow tab on the page. When we found supporting evidence, a receipt, an email, or a social media post showing Amanda at the same event, we marked it with a blue tab. By lunchtime, my dining room table looked less like a family home and more like the preparation room for a courtroom. Carolyn leaned back in her chair. Linda, do you realize how many times Amanda's business expenses appear on your accounts? I stopped counting. I didn't. She turned her legal pad toward me. 42 confirmed business-related charges. I stared at the number. 42. And that's only what we can verify immediately. I covered my mouth with my hand. I kept telling myself they were isolated. They aren't. She pointed toward another column. These are personal luxury purchases. Designer clothing, cosmetics, travel reservations, restaurant bills, spa appointments. Every line represented money I had never knowingly agreed to spend. What hurts the most, I admitted quietly, is that I would have helped her if she'd simply asked. Carolyn looked at me with deep sympathy. People who manipulate rarely ask honestly. They prefer permission that can later be denied. That sentence explained more than I wanted it to. Amanda had never demanded thousands of dollars. She had asked for small favors. One payment here, one signature there, one account update, one helpful favor after another. Each request seemed harmless alone. Together, they formed something entirely different. Before Carolyn left, she handed me a fresh notebook. I want you to keep this with you. I already have one. I know, this one is for conversations only. She opened it to the first page. Every phone call, she wrote the date. Every visit, another line. Every unexpected question about your finances, your house, or your health. She looked directly into my eyes. If Amanda or Eric ever asks something that feels unusual, write it down immediately. I will. And Linda, yes, from today forward, never leave original financial documents where anyone else can access them. That afternoon, I rented a post office box. It felt strangely secretive, almost dishonest. But Carolyn reminded me that privacy and secrecy were not the same thing. You aren't hiding money, she said. You're protecting information. I redirected my bank statements, investment summaries, and insurance correspondence to the new box. Then I stopped by my bank. I'd like to open a new checking account. The banker smiled politely. Certainly. Is this replacing your current account? No. I'd like to keep the existing one active. He nodded. No problem. I transferred enough money into the new account to cover my normal monthly expenses. Nothing more. The larger savings remained untouched. I didn't close the original account because I didn't want Amanda to notice sudden changes. Carolyn had warned me not to alert anyone too early. Sometimes, she had said, the most valuable evidence comes after people believe their plan is still working. 3 days passed quietly, too quietly. Then my phone rang. Amanda. I answered on the third ring. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. She sounded cheerful, almost unusually cheerful. What are you doing tomorrow? I haven't made plans. I thought I'd stop by. That would be nice. I also need to borrow your laptop for a few minutes. My laptop? Mine is acting weird, I frowned. What do you need to do? Oh, just print something. You can print it here if you bring your own computer. Silence. Then she laughed. You always have a solution. I suppose I do. She changed the subject almost immediately. I'll see you tomorrow. When the call ended, I opened Carolyn's notebook. Amanda requested access to my laptop. Changed subject when I suggested another option. The next afternoon, she arrived alone. She hugged me warmly and complimented the flowers on my porch. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about ordinary things, neighbors, church, the weather. Then she casually wandered toward my home office. Mom? Yes. Where do you keep your important papers now? The question came so naturally that someone else might not have noticed. I have them organized. I know, she smiled. I'm just thinking that if something ever happened to you, I'd need to know where everything is. I smiled back. I've made arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Nothing you need to worry about. For the first time, I saw genuine frustration flicker across her face, only for a second. Then it disappeared beneath another practiced smile. You're becoming mysterious. Am I a little? She laughed. I guess you're finally learning from all those detective shows. I laughed too, but inside I remembered every word Carolyn had said. People reveal themselves when they don't get the answers they expect. Amanda spent another hour at my house. She never mentioned the laptop again. Instead, she casually asked whether I had renewed my homeowner's insurance, whether I still received paper bank statements, whether I'd thought any more about downsizing someday. Every question found its place in my notebook after she left. That evening, I drove to my post office box. Among the ordinary mail was a large envelope from my credit card company. Inside was a detailed activity report showing every transaction made by the authorized user account attached to mine. I spread the pages across my kitchen counter. Most purchases matched what I had already discovered. But one entry caught my attention immediately. A payment to a private marketing firm. The invoice description included a client name, Brown and Walker Lifestyle Consulting. No vague merchant title, no abbreviation. The company name appeared in full. For the first time, I held undeniable proof that my personal credit account had directly funded Amanda and Eric's business. I carefully placed the statement into the red folder. Then I wrote a new total at the bottom of my spreadsheet. The number continued climbing, and with every page I added, my confidence grew stronger. I was no longer collecting scattered suspicions. I was documenting a pattern, one that neither Amanda nor Eric realized was slowly becoming impossible to explain away. By the end of the second week, my dining room no longer looked like a place where families gathered for Sunday dinners. It looked like a financial investigation. Every folder had a purpose. Blue tabs marked verified business expenses. Yellow tabs identified suspicious personal purchases. Red tabs highlighted documents related to my house. White tabs held notes from conversations, text messages, and dates I never wanted to forget. I stood over the table one Saturday morning with a calculator in one hand and Robert's old reading glasses in the other. For years, those glasses had rested in the top drawer of his nightstand. I had never been able to move them. That morning, I slipped them on, not because I needed them, but because somehow they made me feel as though Robert were sitting beside me. Let's see what really happened, I whispered. I started at the beginning. The first office rent payment, then the second, then another. Every invoice Amanda had ever shown me as proof that her business was almost taking off now appeared in my records. Only the story had changed. She had told me she needed a short-term loan. The statements showed she had simply charged the expenses to my account, month after month, without mentioning it. The office rent alone totaled over $28,000. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my forehead. How did I miss this? The answer came almost immediately, because I trusted her. Trust makes people stop looking closely, I continued. Marketing campaigns, professional photography, graphic design, website maintenance, search engine advertising, client appreciation dinners, networking breakfasts, luxury floral arrangements. Every glamorous event Amanda proudly posted online had quietly left fingerprints on my financial statements. I opened my laptop and compared dates. One photograph showed Amanda standing in front of a custom backdrop that read, Brown and Walker, Lifestyle Consulting, Elevating Your Lifestyle. She wore a cream-colored designer suit and smiled confidently while holding a microphone. The date beneath the photograph matched a catering invoice charged to my credit card. Exactly. Another picture showed Amanda boarding a flight to Dallas for what she called a leadership summit. My records showed airfare purchased 2 days earlier, hotel reservations, conference registration, airport transportation, all paid from my account. I paid for your success, I murmured. No, I corrected myself. I paid for the appearance of success. That difference mattered. Real success earns its own way. An image survives only as long as someone else keeps paying for it. By mid-afternoon, I had moved on to Eric's expenses. At first, they appeared unrelated. fuel purchases, client lunches, printing costs, real estate, photography. Then I noticed something. Several charges were made immediately after one of Eric's property listings expired without selling. Within days, expensive business expenses appeared on my account. Marketing, advertising, office overhead. It looked as though my money had quietly filled gaps whenever their own cash flow became tight. Carolyn arrived just after 3 o'clock carrying sandwiches. I figured you forgot lunch. I did. She set the food aside without opening it. You found something. I think I found everything. She sat beside me while I explained each category: office expenses, travel, clothing, business development, client entertainment. When I finished, Carolyn remained silent for several moments. Finally, she asked, "Have you totaled it?" "I'm afraid to." "You need to." I reached for the calculator. The numbers climbed steadily. Office rent, marketing, travel, luxury purchases, business software, restaurant bills, photography, brand consulting, emergency transfers. My finger hovered over the equals button. Then I pressed it. The screen displayed $186, 417.83. Neither of us spoke. I checked the figures again, then a third time. The total changed by only a few dollars after correcting one duplicated entry. Still, more than $186,000. 3 years. Nearly everything Amanda had insisted was temporary help. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind people make when reality becomes too unbelievable for tears. "Do you know what hurts?" I asked quietly. "The amount?" I shook my head. If she'd come to me honestly. I looked toward Robert's photograph. "I probably would have helped." Carolyn nodded. "I know. That's the part I can't understand. Manipulation isn't about money alone." "What do you mean?" "It's about control." She pointed toward the folders. "If Amanda had asked permission every time, you could have said no, I suppose. But if she convinced herself she already had the right, she didn't need to finish." I understood. Late that afternoon, while organizing printed emails Amanda had forwarded to me over the years, I noticed one message had been accidentally copied with another conversation attached below it. Most people would never have read that far. I did. The email chain wasn't addressed to me. It was between Amanda and Eric. The subject line simply read cash flow. I felt my heartbeat slow. Carefully I read. Eric wrote first, "We're short again. We can't miss payroll this month." Amanda answered 23 minutes later. "I'll figure something out. Mom still has available credit." My hands began to shake. I kept reading. Eric replied, "Are you sure she won't notice?" Amanda's response arrived only 5 minutes later. The sentence was short, cold, and unlike anything I had ever imagined my daughter capable of writing. "Mom won't fight me. She's lonely. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." I read it once, then again. Then a third time. The words blurred, not because my eyesight failed, because tears finally did what they had refused to do for weeks. I cried, not for the money, not for the business, not even for the lies. I cried because my loneliness, the emptiness Robert's death had left behind, had become something my own daughter measured and calculated. She hadn't simply noticed I was lonely. She had planned around it. She believed loneliness made me easier to control. Carolyn reached across the table and quietly placed a tissue beside me. She didn't interrupt. She knew there are moments when silence is kinder than advice. After several minutes, I folded the tissue carefully and wiped my eyes. I kept blaming myself. For what? For being suspicious. I looked at the printed email. I wasn't suspicious enough. Carolyn picked up the page and read it slowly. "This changes things." "I know. It demonstrates intent." I nodded. "It isn't just spending your money." "No. It's evidence that Amanda understood exactly what she was doing." I placed the email inside a clear plastic document sleeve. Then I moved it to the very front of the red folder. Everything else explained the money. This single page explained the motive. Before Carolyn left that evening, she stopped beside Robert's photograph. "He was right, wasn't he?" I smiled faintly. "He always told me to keep copies." "And you did." After she left, I stood alone in the quiet house. The sunset painted soft orange light across the living room walls. I looked at the folder in my hands. Months earlier, I would have carried it like a burden. Now I understood what it truly was. It wasn't a weapon against my daughter. It was the only voice left for the truth she had spent years trying to bury. Somewhere across town, Amanda was probably planning her next networking event, smiling for cameras, telling another room full of strangers what a devoted daughter she was. She had no idea that every receipt, every statement, every email, and every careless sentence she had written was waiting inside one leather folder. And when the time finally came, the story she had invented about me would collapse under the weight of her own words. The email stayed on my dining room table for 2 days. Not because I didn't know where to file it, because every time I picked it up, I found another reason to stare at it. Mom won't fight me. She's lonely. There are words that wound because they are cruel, and there are words that wound because they contain just enough truth to make the cruelty unbearable. I had been lonely. After Robert died, I had welcomed every visit Amanda made, every casserole she carried through my front door, every phone call that ended with "Love you, Mom." Now I wondered how many of those moments had been genuine. On Monday morning, Carolyn called. "Have you heard from Amanda?" "Not since Friday." "I think you will." "Why?" People who believe they control a situation eventually become impatient. If you've started making changes, they can't see they'll come looking. She was right. That afternoon, Amanda called while I was watering the roses Robert had planted years before. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, sweetheart. I've been thinking." "About what?" "We haven't spent enough time together lately." I looked at the yellow rose bush blooming beside the porch. "I suppose we haven't." "So, Eric and I are hosting a private dinner next Saturday." "A dinner?" "Just close friends, some business contacts, a few people from the charity board." Her voice was unusually warm. "I'd really love for you to come." I felt something tighten inside me. Amanda rarely invited me to events involving important clients. Not after the charity luncheon. "What made you think of inviting me?" She laughed lightly. "Because you're my mother." Simple, perfect, practiced. "I'll think about it." There was a pause. "You'll think about it." I already have another appointment that afternoon. "With who?" I smiled to myself. "I haven't decided yet." She sounded surprised. "Well, let me know." "I will." As soon as we ended the call, I wrote another entry in Carolyn's notebook. Amanda invited me to private dinner with business guests. Unexpected, voice unusually warm. That evening, Carolyn stopped by. When I told her about the invitation, she didn't look surprised. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think she's preparing an audience." "For what?" "We don't know yet." Carolyn sat quietly for a moment before continuing. "Tell me something." "What?" "Has Amanda ever apologized for saying people were supporting you?" "No." "Has she corrected that story?" "No." "Has she admitted using your accounts?" "No." Carolyn folded her hands. "Then nothing has changed." I nodded slowly. "So you think I should go?" "I think you should." I looked at her in surprise. "Really? But not as a mother hoping for reconciliation." "As what?" "As a woman who already knows the truth." The days leading up to the dinner passed strangely. Amanda texted twice to remind me of the time. She even asked if I needed Eric to pick me up. I politely declined. "No, thank you. I'll drive myself." She responded almost immediately. "Are you sure you're comfortable driving?" That question would have sounded caring months earlier. Now it sounded familiar, another reminder that she wanted people to believe I was becoming incapable. I replied simply, "I've been driving safely for over 50 years." She didn't answer. Instead, she sent the address again, as if I might forget. On Thursday morning, I received another envelope at my post office box. This one came from the bank. Inside was additional documentation related to the authorized user request Amanda had submitted months before. One page listed the email address used during the authorization process. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Amanda. Another page showed confirmation notices had been sent to that same email address. Not once, twice. I stared at the documents for several minutes. Amanda hadn't simply benefited from access. She had managed the entire process. I added the pages to the red folder. The folder had become surprisingly heavy. Not because of paper, because every document inside represented another piece of trust that would never return. Friday afternoon, Carolyn arrived carrying a leather portfolio. I brought something. She removed several clear plastic sleeves. What are those? Protection. She smiled. If you're taking documents into a room full of people, don't carry loose papers. Together we organized everything. Section 1, credit card statements. Section 2, business expenses. Section 3, luxury purchases. Section 4, bank records. Section 5, the real estate paperwork Eric had given me. Section 6, the email. Carolyn paused when she reached the final section. This stays at the back. Why? Because it's your strongest evidence. I thought the bank records were. They prove money. She gently tapped the printed email. This proves intent. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies. I woke earlier than usual. For nearly an hour, I sat in Robert's favorite chair holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. His framed photograph rested beside the lamp. I wish you were here. The house remained silent. I don't know how tonight is going to end. Of course, there was no answer. Only memories. I eventually stood and walked upstairs. Getting dressed took longer than I expected. I chose a simple navy dress, the same pearl necklace Robert had given me years earlier. Comfortable shoes, nothing extravagant, nothing that looked defensive. When I looked in the mirror, I saw not the frightened widow I had become after Robert's death, but the woman who had spent decades making certain every financial record told the truth. Today would be no different. Before leaving, I placed the organized file inside Robert's old brown leather briefcase. It had belonged to him during his years as a project supervisor. The handle showed signs of wear. The brass clasps were scratched, but it still locked securely. I rested my hand on the case for a moment. "This isn't revenge," I whispered. "It's the truth." I locked the front door behind me. The drive to Amanda's neighborhood took about 30 minutes. As I turned onto her street, expensive SUVs already lined both sides of the road. People in tailored suits laughed on the front lawn. Elegant dresses shimmered beneath strings of decorative lights. Amanda had planned an impressive evening, exactly the kind of evening where reputations could be built or destroyed. I parked across the street and remained inside my car for a full minute. The briefcase rested on the passenger seat. Inside it lay 3 years of receipts, statements, emails, and quiet observations. Amanda believed she had invited her lonely mother to dinner. She had no idea she had invited the only witness who knew the entire story. I picked up the briefcase, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the front door, knowing that before the night was over, someone would finally have to answer one simple question. Who had really been carrying whom? The moment I stepped through Amanda's front door, I knew the evening had been carefully choreographed. Soft jazz drifted through hidden speakers. Crystal glasses reflected the warm glow of pendant lights hanging above the dining table. Fresh white lilies filled the room with a fragrance that almost hid the smell of roasted herbs coming from the kitchen. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked intentional. Amanda spotted me immediately. "There she is," she called, with the bright, practiced smile I had seen so many times on social media. She walked toward me with both arms open, kissed my cheek, and gently touched my elbow as though I needed help standing. "I'm so glad you came." "So am I," I answered. She glanced at the old leather briefcase in my hand. "What's that?" "Oh," I said calmly, "just some paperwork. I stopped by the post office before coming." She smiled, but I noticed her eyes linger on the briefcase for a second longer than necessary. "Always prepared. You know me." "I do." If only that had still been true. Eric appeared from the dining room carrying 2 wine glasses. "Miss Linda, you look wonderful." "Thank you." He offered me a glass. "I'll stick with water tonight." "Of course." His smile remained effortless, but I could feel both of them studying me. Not obviously. Just enough to notice that I had arrived alone carrying something they hadn't expected. Amanda led me into the living room where several guests were already gathered. I immediately recognized Melissa Grant, who greeted me with a warm hug instead of the polite handshake she'd given me at the charity luncheon. "I'm happy you came," she whispered. "So am I." Across the room stood David Price, the investor Amanda had once mentioned with obvious excitement. She had described him as someone capable of transforming Brown & Walker Lifestyle Consulting into a regional brand. Nearby stood Monica Reed from the charity board chatting with two local business owners. Everyone looked successful. Everyone looked comfortable. Everyone believed they knew Amanda. None of them knew the Amanda whose emails sat inside my briefcase. Dinner began shortly after 7. Amanda had arranged the seating carefully. Eric sat at one end of the table, Amanda at the other. I was seated halfway down the table directly across from David Price. Interesting. Close enough to be seen. Far enough away not to dominate the conversation. As the first course was served, Amanda effortlessly guided every discussion. She complimented David on his latest investment. She congratulated Monica on a successful fundraiser. She laughed at exactly the right moments. She looked every bit the polished entrepreneur she wanted the world to admire. I watched quietly, listening, observing, just as I had done with financial records for decades. About halfway through the meal, David raised his glass. "I have to say, Amanda, everyone speaks so highly of your commitment to family." Amanda lowered her eyes modestly. "Thank you. It's refreshing." She smiled. "I believe success means very little if you forget the people who depend on you." My fingers tightened slightly around my water glass. There it was, the opening she had been waiting for. Amanda sighed softly. "It hasn't always been easy." Several guests turned toward her. She had their attention now. "You all know Eric and I have worked hard to build our business." Nods circled the table. "But life isn't only about business." She looked directly at me. "Sometimes family responsibilities become much bigger than you expect." Nobody spoke. Amanda continued. "When a parent gets older," she paused just long enough, "things change." Eric reached over and gently squeezed her hand. The gesture looked spontaneous. It wasn't. They had rehearsed this. "I've learned," Amanda said, "that loving someone sometimes means making sacrifices they don't even realize you're making." Monica smiled sympathetically. "That must be difficult." "It is." Amanda took a slow breath. "There are days when I feel overwhelmed." David nodded. "I'm sure." Amanda looked toward me again. "I love my mother. I always will." Another pause. "But—" The room became silent. "She's become a financial burden." No one moved. Even the waitstaff seemed to freeze. Amanda continued before anyone could react. "We've quietly covered expenses for years, because that's what family does." Eric lowered his eyes as though embarrassed by the admission. "We never wanted recognition." Amanda's voice softened. "But there comes a point when difficult conversations have to happen." She looked directly at me. "We've even been discussing whether selling Mom's house might be the safest option for her future." Someone across the table whispered, "How sad." Another guest gave me the same pitying smile I had seen at the charity luncheon. The same smile, the same story, only a bigger audience. For a few seconds, I simply sat there. I could hear Robert's voice somewhere deep inside my memory. "Never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what we built." Amanda waited. She expected tears, maybe denial, maybe silence. She certainly didn't expect calm. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. Then I looked directly at my daughter, Amanda. She smiled politely. "Yes, Mom. Would you repeat what you just called me?" Her smile faltered. "Only slightly. I'm sorry. I'd like everyone to hear it clearly." The room remained silent. Amanda laughed awkwardly. "I didn't mean anything cruel." "I didn't say you did." I folded my hands. "I simply asked you to repeat it." She looked around the table, searching for support. Finally, she spoke. "I said you've become—" She hesitated. "A financial burden." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." Amanda frowned. "For what?" "For saying it twice." She blinked. "I don't understand." "I know." I reached beside my chair and lifted Robert's old leather briefcase onto my lap. The brass clasps clicked loudly as I opened it. Several guests instinctively leaned forward. Amanda's expression changed. Not fear, not yet. Confusion. "What are you doing?" she asked. I carefully removed a thick leather folder, then another, then a neatly organized stack of clear document sleeves. I placed them gently in front of me. Nobody spoke. Even Eric's confident smile disappeared. "Amanda," I said quietly, "you've told everyone here that you've spent years supporting me." "Yes." "You've described me as your financial burden." "You've suggested selling my home because you and Eric have been carrying me." She swallowed. "We've only tried to help." I looked around the table, at David, at Monica, at Melissa, at every guest who had listened politely to Amanda's performance. Then I rested my hand on the folder. "I've spent my entire career working with financial records," I spoke slowly. "I believe numbers tell the truth even when people don't." Amanda's face lost its color. I opened the first folder. "If I'm truly the burden you've described," I slid the top document onto the table, "then perhaps everyone deserves to see who has actually been paying whose bills." The room fell completely silent. No music, no conversation, no clinking silverware. Only the soft sound of paper sliding across polished wood. Amanda stared at the first statement without blinking. Eric leaned forward, recognizing the bank logo immediately. David Price quietly removed his reading glasses. Melissa looked from the documents to Amanda, already understanding what was about to happen. I met my daughter's eyes one final time before beginning. "This," I said calmly, "is where the real story starts." No one spoke. The only sound in the dining room was the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the soft rustle of paper as I slid the first statement across the polished oak table. Amanda stared at it without moving. Eric leaned forward, trying to read the heading before anyone else could. David Price adjusted his glasses. Monica Reed slowly lowered her wine glass. I took a slow breath. For 35 years, I worked as a financial records manager for one of the largest hospital systems in Georgia. No one interrupted. My job was simple. When numbers didn't match, I found out why. I looked directly at Amanda, and numbers never lie for very long. I picked up the first document. This is my credit card statement from 14 months ago. I placed it in front of David. The highlighted charge is for office rent. David frowned. "For Brown & Walker Lifestyle Consulting," he read quietly. I nodded, yes. Amanda immediately forced a smile. "Mom, that was a loan." I looked at her calmly. "Was it?" She hesitated. You agreed to help." "I agreed to help when you asked." I opened another sleeve. "This payment was made 3 days before you told me your office landlord had given you an extension." Amanda swallowed. You never asked." I placed another statement on the table. "And neither did this one." Then another, and this, another, and this. Every page carried the same highlighted notes: office rent, marketing, event catering, photography, business software, client entertainment. The neat yellow tabs sticking from the pages looked almost harmless until people began reading them. David turned several pages himself. "These are all connected to your company." Amanda's smile had disappeared. "They're business expenses." "Yes," I answered. "They are." She looked around the room desperately. "My mother wanted to invest in my business." "No." I gently shook my head. "I wanted to support my daughter." I slid another folder forward. These charges were never presented to me as investments. The room remained silent. Monica finally asked softly, "Did you reimburse your mother?" Amanda answered before I could. "Family doesn't reimburse family." I looked at Monica. "Would you like to know what Amanda told me each time?" Monica nodded. She called them temporary emergencies. I lifted another page. She said this hotel charge was a banking error. Another page. She said this marketing invoice was accidentally billed to the wrong account. Another. She said this designer clothing purchase was fraud that the bank would reverse. I looked back at Amanda. "Do you remember saying those things?" Amanda opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Eric finally spoke. "Miss Linda, I think we're getting lost in accounting details. I smiled faintly. Accounting details built your business. His jaw tightened. This isn't the place. No. You're embarrassing Amanda. I met his eyes. She called me a financial burden in front of everyone here. Nobody defended him. He looked away first. I opened the second folder. This section concerns luxury spending. Amanda's face grew noticeably paler. I laid photographs beside the statements. One showed Amanda smiling at a leadership conference. Behind it sat the airline receipt. Another showed her speaking beneath an elegant floral backdrop. Behind it sat the catering invoice. Another displayed Amanda wearing a cream designer suit. Beside it rested the boutique receipt. David looked from one document to the next. These dates match. Yes, they all do. Amanda finally raised her voice. You're invading my privacy. I looked at her sadly. These purchases were made on my account. They benefited my business. No, I shook my head. They benefited your image. Silence returned. Melissa quietly wiped tears from her eyes. I remember that conference, she whispered. You told everyone you'd landed a huge corporate contract. Amanda stared at her. I thought I had. Melissa slowly shook her head. You said you paid for the entire trip yourself. Amanda said nothing. I opened the third folder. This one concerns my home. Eric immediately stiffened. I removed the listing agreement he had brought to my house. David leaned forward. You were listing Mrs. Brown's property, Eric answered confidently. We discussed future planning. I turned to the page Carolyn had marked. This agreement allows commission rights under unusually broad conditions. Eric cleared his throat. That's standard. It wasn't complete. I lifted the pages. There was a missing page. He said nothing. And when I asked to see it, you told me I didn't need to read every line. David slowly looked toward Eric. Did you actually say that Eric shifted in his chair? I remember exactly what you meant. I kept my voice level. You told a woman who spent 35 years reviewing financial documents not to read a contract. A nervous laugh escaped someone at the far end of the table. It quickly died. Amanda reached for the papers. Mom, stop. I gently pulled them back. No. She looked directly at me. Please. That single word might once have softened me. Tonight it reminded me of every other time she had asked for something while hiding the truth. I opened the final folder. This one, I said quietly, contains something I wish I had never found. Carolyn had advised me to save it for last. Now I understood why. I removed the printed email. Amanda saw it before anyone else. Every drop of color drained from her face. No, she whispered. I placed copies in front of David and Monica. Then I read aloud. Eric wrote, We're short again. We can't miss payroll this month. I paused. The room had become impossibly still. Then I continued. Amanda replied, I'll figure something out. Mom still has available credit. Amanda closed her eyes. I finished reading the final lines. Eric asked, Are you sure she won't notice? My voice remained steady. Amanda answered, I looked at my daughter. Mom won't fight me. She's lonely. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. No one moved. Melissa covered her mouth. Monica slowly folded the paper back onto the table. David removed his glasses entirely. He stared at Amanda for several long seconds before speaking. Is this real? Amanda's lips trembled. She searched the room for anyone to rescue her. No one did. She finally looked at me. Mom. For the first time that evening, she didn't sound confident. She sounded frightened. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I simply answered with the truth. I spent years believing I had failed you somehow. I rested my hand on the stack of files, but these papers taught me something. I looked around the table. I was never your financial burden. My eyes returned to Amanda. I was your financial foundation. The silence after my last sentence felt heavier than any argument. No one reached for another bite of food. No one lifted another glass. Amanda sat motionless, her hands trembling in her lap, while the printed email rested only inches away from her plate. For years, she had mastered the art of speaking before anyone else could question her. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, the document spoke louder than she ever could. David Price was the first to break the silence. "Is there any explanation for this?" His voice wasn't angry. It was disappointed. Amanda looked at him, then at Eric, silently pleading for someone to rescue her. Eric cleared his throat. "These emails are being taken out of context." I folded my hands. "Then please give us the proper context." He hesitated. "We were under financial pressure." "I know you were. You don't understand what it's like running a business." "I understand exactly what it's like to balance accounts." Eric's jaw tightened. "I meant emotionally." I nodded. "And because you were under pressure, my retirement became your emergency fund." He had no answer. Amanda finally found her voice. "Mom, I was going to pay you back." I looked at her quietly. "When?" She blinked. "When the business succeeded. It had 3 years." She lowered her eyes. "I just needed more time." I gently slid another page across the table. "This statement is from 11 months ago." Another. "And this one is from 7 months ago." Another. "And this one is from 3 weeks ago." I looked directly at her. "You never slowed down. You kept spending." Amanda's breathing became uneven. "I thought I could fix everything." "No," I shook my head. "You thought I would never notice." The words landed harder than I intended, not because I shouted them, because they were true. Melissa quietly spoke from across the table. "Amanda." Amanda looked up. "Why didn't you just tell your mother your business was struggling?" Amanda covered her face for a moment before answering. "Because everyone expected me to be successful." She looked around the room. "I built this image. I couldn't let it fall apart." David frowned. "So you used your mother's money to protect your reputation?" Amanda said nothing. Monica Reed leaned forward. "Is that why you kept telling people your mother depended on you?" Amanda's shoulders sagged. Monica's expression softened, but her words remained firm. "You weren't protecting her. You were protecting your image." Those words seemed to drain the last bit of confidence from Amanda. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Eric suddenly pushed his chair back. "This is getting out of hand." He stood. "I think everyone needs to calm down." "No," David said evenly. "I think everyone has finally become calm enough to see what's happening." Eric looked at him in surprise. David continued. "I was considering investing in Brown and Walker Lifestyle Consulting." Amanda's eyes widened. "I know. I believed I was investing in responsible leadership." He rested his hand on the stack of documents. "Instead, I'm looking at evidence suggesting your company survived by using your mother's finances without full transparency." Amanda whispered, "David." He slowly shook his head. "I don't think we have anything more to discuss professionally." Amanda's face turned pale. Monica spoke next. "Our foundation values integrity above image." She looked genuinely saddened. "I don't know how we move forward after tonight." Amanda's breathing grew faster. "No, please." She reached toward Monica instinctively, but Monica quietly folded her hands in her lap. No one was angry anymore. That was somehow worse. Anger passes, disappointment lingers. Eric looked at me. "What do you want?" The question hung in the air. Revenge, humiliation, an apology. I answered honestly. "I wanted my daughter." Amanda looked at me through tear-filled eyes. "I was here." "No." My voice remained calm. "The daughter I raised would never have looked at my loneliness and called it an opportunity." Amanda began crying openly. "I know." "You don't." I shook my head. "Not yet. You understand that you were caught, but you don't yet understand what you broke." She buried her face in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You already did." The words were simple. There was no bitterness in them anymore, only truth. Carolyn's advice echoed in my mind. Separate the person from the evidence. So I did. I wasn't looking at Amanda as an enemy. I was looking at my daughter, a frightened woman who had buried one bad decision beneath another until she no longer remembered where honesty ended. I stood slowly. "I'm leaving." Amanda immediately looked up. "Mom, don't go. I have everything I came for." "You haven't heard everything." I picked up the folders one by one. "I've heard enough for tonight." Eric stepped aside as I walked toward the front door. For the first time since I'd met him, he had nothing clever to say. David quietly stood as well. So did I. Monica followed. Linda, I turned. I'm sorry this happened to you. I offered a tired smile. So am I. Melissa walked me to the front porch. I'm ashamed I believed those stories. You believed what you were told. I should have asked. I gently squeezed her hand. Most people don't ask. Outside, the evening air felt cooler than when I had arrived. I placed Robert's old briefcase on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. Through Amanda's dining room window, I could see figures still standing around the table. Nobody was eating anymore. Nobody was celebrating. The performance was over. And for the first time in years, the truth had finally been allowed to stay in the room after everyone else ran out of excuses. I didn't cry on the drive home. I expected to. For weeks, I had imagined 100 different endings to that dinner. In some, Amanda apologized the moment she saw the evidence. In others, she stormed out, refusing to hear another word. I had even imagined myself breaking down in front of everyone. None of those things happened. Instead, I felt strangely calm. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light came on automatically. Robert had installed that motion sensor years earlier because he hated the idea of me walking up dark steps after sunset. I stood there for a moment looking at the house. Eric had seen property. Amanda had seen equity. I still saw home. Inside, I placed Robert's old briefcase on the dining room table, exactly where the investigation had begun. The folders were still perfectly organized, but somehow they felt lighter now. Not because there were fewer documents, because I no longer carried them alone. The people who had heard Amanda's speech had also heard the truth. My phone rang just before 10 o'clock. Carolyn, how did it go? I told the truth. And they listened. There was a brief silence before she asked the question that mattered most. Did you promise anything? No. Did you threaten anyone? No. Excellent. I smiled faintly. You sound relieved. I am. Truth rarely needs threats. I told her everything that had happened, from Amanda's speech to David's decision to walk away from the investment. When I finished, Carolyn said quietly, "Tomorrow we start protecting your future." The next morning, I met her at my bank. The branch manager, Thomas Ellis, greeted us in his office. "Mrs. Brown, it's good to see you again." I wish it were under happier circumstances. Carolyn placed a neatly organized folder on his desk. "We're requesting immediate changes to every account connected to Mrs. Brown." Thomas reviewed the documents carefully. "Remove all authorized users." "Yes." "Replace online credentials immediately." "New debit cards." "Yes." I added one more request. "I'd also like written confirmation that no one other than me may make changes in person or electronically without additional identity verification." Thomas nodded. "We can absolutely do that." As he worked through the paperwork, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control, not over Amanda, over my own life. From the bank, Carolyn and I drove to my house. She handed me a new set of house keys. "I stopped by a locksmith before meeting you." I looked at her in surprise. "You already arranged it." "I assumed you wouldn't want the old spare key floating around." Within 2 hours, every exterior lock had been replaced. For the first time since giving Amanda the emergency key, I knew exactly who could enter my home. That afternoon, I received the first text from Amanda. "Mom, please call me." I looked at the screen for several seconds, then I placed the phone face down. An hour later, another message arrived. "This isn't how I wanted things to happen." Then another. "Can we please talk privately?" Carolyn happened to be reviewing paperwork beside me when the messages appeared. "You don't have to answer today." "I know." "You also don't have to answer out of guilt." I nodded. That was the hardest part, not answering. For so many years, motherhood had taught me to respond immediately whenever Amanda needed me. Now I needed to learn something different. Boundaries. Late that afternoon, another phone call came. This time, it was David Price. "Mrs. Brown." "Speaking." "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all." "I wanted to tell you something personally." I waited. "I've withdrawn completely from any investment discussions with Amanda and Eric." "I understand." I also wanted to apologize. There is no need. I believed a story about your family without ever asking whether it was true. His honesty surprised me. I appreciate you saying that. There was one more thing. Yes, I've served on the board of a nonprofit that educates older adults about financial exploitation. I listened quietly. If you were ever willing to share your experience after everything settles, I think it could help people. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than grief, purpose. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. When the call ended, I looked out the kitchen window. Maybe something good could eventually grow from all this. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but someday. The following morning, another envelope arrived. This one was from Eric's real estate brokerage. It wasn't addressed to me personally, but to Mrs. Linda Brown. Inside was a short letter acknowledging receipt of concerns regarding the proposed listing agreement and confirming the company had opened an internal review. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't trying to ruin Eric's career, but actions have consequences, especially when trust is involved. By Friday, word had begun to spread quietly through Amanda's professional circle. Not because I had called anyone, because the people who attended the dinner had their own conversations. Melissa sent me a brief email. I wanted you to know that several women from the networking group reached out to ask how you're doing. No one is repeating the old story anymore. I read that sentence twice. No one is repeating the old story anymore. For months, maybe years, Amanda's version of my life had traveled farther than I ever knew. Now, without anger or public revenge, it was beginning to disappear. That evening, I walked through my garden carrying a small watering can. The roses needed pruning. The tomatoes needed support stakes. Life, despite everything, kept asking to be cared for. As the sun began to set, I paused beside the maple tree Robert had planted when Amanda was 5 years old. I rested my hand against the rough bark. I don't know what happens next, I whispered. What I did know was this. I had spent too much of my life believing that protecting my daughter meant protecting her from the consequences of her choices. Perhaps real love required something more difficult, allowing her to face those consequences while refusing to surrender my own dignity. For the first time since Robert died, I no longer felt like a woman waiting for someone else to decide what happened to her. The files had exposed the truth. Now it was my responsibility to build a future that no longer depended on silence. 3 weeks passed before Amanda came to my house. Not with Eric, not in one of the expensive SUVs they had proudly driven to networking events. She arrived alone in an older sedan I had never seen before. When I looked through the front window and saw her standing on the porch, I almost didn't recognize her. Her designer clothes were gone. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and no jewelry except her wedding ring. Even her posture had changed. She wasn't standing like a woman expecting admiration. She looked like someone hoping a door would simply open. I stepped outside before she could knock. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Amanda." She looked toward the front door. "Can I come in?" I remembered every conversation Carolyn and I had shared over the past month. Boundaries are easier to set than to keep. "I'm willing to talk," I said quietly, "but we'll sit out here." Her eyes dropped to the porch swing Robert had built years ago. She nodded. "Okay." We sat in silence for nearly a minute. The neighborhood was peaceful. A lawnmower hummed somewhere down the street. Children laughed from a nearby backyard. Ordinary sounds, an ordinary afternoon. An extraordinarily difficult conversation. Amanda finally spoke. "I've been trying to figure out where to begin. The truth is usually a good place." She nodded slowly. "I know." She took a long breath. "The company is over." "I heard." "David walked away." "I know." "Monica ended the partnership with the foundation." I didn't respond. She wasn't telling me anything I hadn't expected. I've spent the last 3 weeks answering phone calls from people I thought were friends. And they weren't calling because they cared. She looked down at her hands. They wanted to know if the stories were true. Were they? She closed her eyes. Yes. The word barely rose above a whisper. For the first time since Robert died, I heard my daughter admit something without trying to soften it. I lied. Another silence settled between us. I lied to people. I lied to myself. And eventually, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. I lied to you. I let her words remain where they were. They deserved that much. Amanda wiped her face. I kept telling myself I'd fix everything before you found out. I know. I really believed the business would take off. I know. And once it did, she stopped. I thought I'd pay everything back. I looked at her gently. Did you ever decide when you were going to tell me the truth? She didn't answer. Because there wasn't one. There had never been a plan to confess. Only a plan not to get caught. I was ashamed, she admitted. When did the shame begin? She thought for a long time. When the business started failing, I nodded. And when did the lies begin? The same week, she laughed bitterly. I thought pretending to be successful would make me successful. I remembered the photographs, the conferences, the catered events, the elegant branding. It worked. She looked confused. What do you mean? You convinced everyone. Her shoulders slumped. Except myself. For the first time, I saw the frightened little girl she had once been. Not because she was innocent, because she had finally stopped performing. I blamed Eric for a while, she said. I know. But the truth is, she looked directly at me. Every time he asked if we should stop, I said we couldn't. That surprised me. I thought you said he pressured you. He did. She swallowed. But I agreed. I approved it. I signed things. I used your accounts. I told people you depended on me. I called you, her voice cracked, a financial burden. The words hung between us. Neither of us tried to take them back. I've replayed that dinner every night, she whispered. I don't know why I said it. I do. She looked at me. You needed everyone in that room to believe your story. She nodded slowly. If they believed you were supporting me, they wouldn't ask how you were paying for your life. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Exactly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had stayed in my heart longer than any financial document. When your father died, Amanda looked up. Did you ever think about what it was like for me? She covered her mouth. I thought you were strong. I was. I thought you didn't need anyone. I needed my daughter. She cried openly now. I know. No. I shook my head gently. You know it now. She lowered her head. I miss birthdays because I was working. I remember. I miss school plays. I remember. But I never wanted you to doubt one thing. She looked at me. You were always more important than money. I paused. You made me feel like money had become more important than me. Amanda broke completely. I'm sorry. The apology wasn't dramatic. There were no speeches, no excuses, just 2 words spoken by a woman who finally understood what she had destroyed. I believed she was sorry, but sorrow and repair are not the same thing. I forgive you. She looked up in surprise. You do. I forgive you because I refuse to spend the rest of my life carrying hatred. Hope appeared in her eyes. Then I continued. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. The hope softened into understanding. I know. I've already worked with Carolyn. She nodded. I received the repayment agreement. You'll honor it. I will. You'll cooperate with the bank. I will. You'll correct the false stories whenever you have the opportunity. I've already started. And one more thing. She waited. You will never again have access to my accounts, my home, or my financial documents. I understand. If I choose to invite you inside someday, I glanced toward the front door. That will be my decision, not yours. Amanda looked at the house. I noticed you changed the locks. I did. I deserve that. You did. She nodded without arguing. That more than anything else told me she had begun changing. People who truly accept responsibility stop negotiating with reality. She reached into her purse and removed a small envelope. I wanted to give you this. Inside was a cashier's check. The amount wasn't large, just the first scheduled repayment. Across the memo line, she had written one word, beginning. I looked at it for a long moment before placing it back inside the envelope. This doesn't fix everything. I know. It isn't supposed to. She smiled sadly. "It's just the first honest payment I've ever made." I stood. "So this is where we begin." She stood too. Neither of us hugged. Not yet. Some relationships need distance before they can find closeness again. Amanda walked slowly toward her car. Halfway down the path, she turned back. "I love you, Mom." I believe she meant it, for the first time in years. "I love you too." Then I added the words she needed to hear. "But from now on, love will always have boundaries." She nodded once. "I understand." As she drove away, I looked at Robert's blue front door glowing in the afternoon sun. Months earlier, I would have measured that conversation by whether it made me feel better. Instead, I measured it by something else. For the first time since this nightmare began, neither my daughter nor I had hidden behind a lie. And that was a beginning worth protecting. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it had the night Amanda called me a financial burden. The strange thing was that very little had changed on the outside. I still lived in the same brick house. Robert's blue front door still greeted me every morning. The roses still bloomed beside the porch. I still drank my coffee at the kitchen table where we had shared thousands of quiet conversations. But inside me, everything was different. I no longer apologized for protecting myself. I no longer confused love with unlimited access, and I no longer believed that keeping peace was more important than keeping the truth. The repayment agreement Carolyn had helped prepare was working exactly as intended. Amanda made every payment on time. They were not large enough to erase the financial damage overnight, but they represented something far more valuable than dollars. They represented accountability. There were no more excuses, no more forgotten promises, no more emergency stories. Every payment arrived with a receipt, a record, and a paper trail. Ironically, the daughter who once laughed at my habit of keeping files had become the person who benefited most from them, because the files did not exist to destroy her. They created a clear path for rebuilding trust, one honest step at a time. Eric's situation unfolded differently. His real estate brokerage completed its internal review. I was never interested in learning every detail of the outcome because my goal had never been revenge. I only knew he was no longer handling senior clients and had left the company several months later. Carolyn told me something that stayed with me. When people lose trust, they often think they've lost everything. She smiled gently. The truth is, they've only lost the shortcut. Trust still exists. It simply has to be earned the slow way. Amanda eventually separated her finances completely from Eric's. Whether their marriage would survive, I honestly didn't know. For the first time in years, that decision belonged to them instead of me. I had spent too much of my life trying to rescue people from consequences that weren't mine to carry. That season of my life was over. One Saturday morning, Melissa invited me to speak to a small community group at the local senior center. I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my favorite thing. Then I remembered David Price's phone call weeks earlier. If you ever share your experience, it could help someone else. So I accepted. About 40 people attended. Some were retirees. Some were adult children caring for aging parents. Some were widows like me. I stood at the front of the room holding the same brown leather briefcase Robert had carried for years. "I brought this," I began, "because people often think this story is about money." I placed the briefcase on the table. It isn't. I slowly removed one folder after another. Blue tabs, yellow tabs, red tabs. People leaned forward. "This story is about something much easier to lose than money." I rested my hand on the top folder. Trust. For the next hour, I didn't mention Amanda's name once. I wasn't there to embarrass my daughter. I was there to explain how manipulation often begins. Not with enormous lies, with tiny ones. Not with stolen houses, with borrowed passwords. Not with forged signatures, with innocent-looking requests to help. When I finished, several people stayed behind. An elderly gentleman quietly admitted his grandson had recently begun asking unusual questions about his retirement accounts. A widow confessed she had signed paperwork she didn't fully understand because she was afraid of looking foolish. A middle-aged woman hugged me with tears in her eyes. My mother is going through something similar, she whispered. Now I know what questions to ask. Driving home that afternoon, I realized something unexpected. The worst experience of my life had become one of the most useful. Not because it had happened, because I had finally chosen to speak about it. A few weeks later, Amanda called. Mom? Hi, sweetheart. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. The senior center posted pictures from your presentation. They did. I read some of the comments. I waited. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words surprised me, not because I had been waiting to hear them, because they sounded sincere. Thank you. She hesitated. I know I don't deserve much from you. This isn't about deserving. No. It's about choices. She was quiet for several seconds. I'm trying to make better ones. I can see that. We talked for another 15 minutes. Not about money, not about repayment, not about the past. We talked about her new job with a local nonprofit, about the apartment she had rented, about a recipe she had finally learned to cook without burning. The conversation felt ordinary. Months earlier, I would have called that boring. Now I knew better. Peace often sounds ordinary. One Sunday afternoon, Amanda came over for lunch. This time she knocked before entering. She waited for me to open the door. She carried flowers instead of paperwork, and when we finished eating, she asked a question I never thought I would hear. Mom, may I help wash the dishes? May I? Not, I'll do it, not let me handle it. A request, not an assumption. I smiled. Of course. As we stood side by side in the kitchen, she quietly said, Dad would probably tell us we're both using too much soap. I laughed. He absolutely would. For a moment it felt as though Robert had joined us again, not in sadness, but in memory. After Amanda left that afternoon, I walked through the house with the windows open. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass into the living room. I stopped beside Robert's photograph. You always told me to keep good records. I smiled. You were right. Then I corrected myself. No, we were right. Because Robert had taught me that honesty mattered. My career had taught me that details mattered, and this painful chapter of my life had taught me that boundaries mattered just as much as love. The files that once sat hidden inside a leather briefcase are still in my home today, not because I expect to use them again, but because they remind me of something I hope I never forget. The strongest person in the room is not always the loudest. Sometimes it's the quiet woman who keeps the receipts, tells the truth, and refuses to let anyone rewrite her story. After everything that happened, I realized that the greatest loss wasn't the money. Money can be earned, saved, and repaid. Trust is different. Once it's broken, rebuilding it requires honesty, patience, humility, and time. Loving your family does not mean surrendering your dignity, your independence, or your judgment. Healthy love includes healthy boundaries. Saying no to manipulation is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect. If my story resonates with you, remember this. Never feel guilty for asking questions about your own finances, your own home, or your own future. Keep records. Read every document before you sign it, and never let anyone convince you that protecting yourself means you love your family less. Sometimes protecting yourself is the very thing that gives a relationship its only chance to heal. Thank you for spending this journey with me. If you've ever faced betrayal manipulation or found the strength to rebuild after heartbreak, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Your experience may encourage someone who feels completely alone today. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories about family resilience, justice, and hope.